Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and good Shabbos from a cloudy and hazy and hot and humid, as it were, with some rain this week. From Huntington, we are here for Shabbat. It's no matter what the weather is outside, inside, it's always beautiful because we are here to welcome and to spend a little bit of Shabbat together. So we are officially on High Holiday Countdown. We're 7 weeks out. 7 weeks out. After Tisha B'Av, there's 7 weeks. There's the 3 weeks that lead into Tisha B'Av, then Tisha B'Av, and then 7 weeks out for until the high holidays. So a little bit of a quiet time, but looking at high holidays in the future. We're going to begin on page 2. We have Sam up here already. We're going to light candles. Page 2.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who kindled light, so may we in our own day be among those who kindle light. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lahalit ner shel Shabbat.
Amen. Thank you, Sam. All right, let's continue on page 6. Page 6 we'll read responsively in English. May the door of this synagogue be wide enough to receive all who hunger for love, all who are lonely for friendship.
May it welcome all who have cares to unburden, thanks to express, hopes to nurture.
May the door of this synagogue be narrow enough to shut out pettiness and pride, envy and enmity.
May its threshold be no stumbling block to young or straying feet.
May it be too high to admit complacency, selfishness, and harshness.
May the synagogue be, for all who enter, the doorway to a richer and more meaningful life.
Let's jump ahead to page 20. Page 20, we'll continue with Lecha Dodi. First 2 and last 2 verses, 1 and 2 and 8 and 9. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad, Yishmi'anu el hamiuchad, Adonai echad u'shmo echad, L'shem u'tiferet v'litila, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu b'necha, Ki mekor ha'bracha, Me'rosh mikedem nesucha, Sof ma'aseh b'machshava techila, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Yamin u'smol tifrotzi, V'et Adonai taritzi, Al yad ish ben partzi, V'nismecha v'nagila, Lecha Dodi likrat kala, Penei Shabbat nikabela. Boi b'shalom ateret bala, Gam b'simcha uvtzohala, Toch emunei am segula, Boi chala, Lecha dodi likrat kala, B'nei Shabbat nikabela. We'll just turn the page to page 22 and let's read together a song for Shabbat, the top paragraph. It is good to praise Adonai, to sing hymns to your name, O Most High, to proclaim your steadfast love at daybreak, your faithfulness each night, with a 10-stringed harp, with voice and lyre together. You have gladdened me by your deeds, Adonai. I shout for joy at your handiwork. How great are your works, Adonai, how very subtle your designs. A brute cannot know, a fool cannot understand this. And in the Hebrew, Tzadika tamar yifrach, ke'erez balvanon, yiskeshetuli, beveit Adonai. Bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu, od yenuvun peseva, deshenim verananim yiyu lehagid. Ki Ashar Adonai Tzuri v'lo havlatabo. And on page 24, we'll welcome the angels that come to spend Shabbat with us. Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei HaSharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi Melech Malachei HaMlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei HaMlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Barchuni l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei HaMlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzeitkhem l'shalom, Malachei HaShalom, Malachei Elyon. Mi Melech Malachei HaMlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we'll end Kabbalat Shabbat with Shalom Aleichem and move forward to the Arvit, to the evening service for Shabbat, page 145, Chatzi Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalmad yivrach yerutei v'yamlik malchutei, b'chayechon hu v'yomechon, uv'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala, uv'izmahan kahariv, v'yemeru amen. Yehi Shmei Rabbah Mevorach, Le'olam Olmei Almaya. Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpar, V'yitramam, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitalev, V'yitalal, Shmei Dekudisha, Brichu, Leila min kol birchata v'shirata, Tushbechata v'nechemata, Damiran b'alma, v'yemiru, Amen. We are on page 146, the formal call to evening worship. Baruch hu et Adonai hamevorach.
Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Leolam Vayed.
Baruch Adonai hamevorach leolam vaed. And we continue responsively on page 147 near the bottom. Adonai, your majesty is proclaimed by the marvels of earth and sky. Sun, moon, and stars testify to your power and wisdom.
Day follows day in the succession, and the years vanish, but your sovereignty endures.
Though all things pass, let not your glory depart from us. Help us to become co-workers with you and endow our fleeting days with abiding worth. Baruch atah Adonai hama'ariv aravim. Page 148, Ahavat Olam. Ahavat Olam Beit Yisrael Amcha Avta Torah u'mitzvot Chukim u'mishpatim Otanu limadeta Al kein Adonai Eloheinu B'shochveinu uvkumeinu Nasiach bechukecha V'nismach b'divrei Toratecha U'v'mitzvotecha Le'olam va'ed Ki heim chayenu v'yorech yameinu v'yorech yameinu Uvahem nehege yomam v'layla yomam v'layla Ve'ahavatecha atasir mimenu li'olamim Baruch atah Adonai Ohev Amo Yisrael Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha B'chol levavcha u'b'chol nafshecha u'b'chol miotecha v'hayu advarim ha'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom ha'levavecha v'shinantam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha uvlektecha v'derech uv'shoktecha uv'kumecha uv'kshartam liot al yadecha v'hayu latotafot bein heinecha uchtavtam al mezuzot beitecha uv'isharecha Leman tizkaru v'asitem et kol mitzvotai v'tem kedoshim le'Elohechem Ani Adonai Elohechem Asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'Elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem. Let's read responsibly on page 151. We worship the power that unites the universe, a promise of harmony for all.
Yet that oneness eludes our grasp, as in perfection evil abound.
Before our eyes there is a vision of perfection, order, and goodness.
There is evil enough to break the heart, and there is good enough to exalt the soul.
When will redemption come?
When we grant everyone what we claim for ourselves.
Long ago we escaped the tyranny of Egypt. Our people saw the power of the Most High.
We learned God's presence redeems time and event, so we celebrate this power that makes for freedom.
Top of page 152. Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar ba'kodesh, Norah tehilot osef eleh, Malchutecha ra'u vanecha, bokeam lifnei Moshe, Zeili anu v'amru, Adonai yimloch le'olam va'ed, V'ne'emar ki fada Adonai et Yaakov, Uga'alo miyad chazak mimenu, Baruch atah Adonai, Ga'al Yisrael. Top of page 153, the first two lines of Hashkivenu. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu l'shalom, v'hamidenu shomreinu l'chaim. And let's read together on the bottom of 153. Give us a place to rest, O God. Shelter us in the long, soft evening shadows of your truth. You are true protection and safety. In your presence we find love and acceptance. Watch over us as we go forth. Prepare for us as we return. Spread over us your shelter of peace, over all we love, over our Jerusalem and yours. Baruch atah Adonai, hapores sukat shalom aleinu, ve'al kol amo Yisrael, ve'al Yerushalayim. Page 154, verses from the book of Shemot, from the book of Exodus, for Shabbat Vishamru. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat, La'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Vishamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat. La'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael, oti li'olam, oti li'olam, oti li'olam. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat. La'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et hashamayim v'et haaretz vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat. La'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. Uvayom hashvi'i Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash, Shabbat vayinafash. Vishamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat. La'asot et ha-Shabbat ledorotam berit olam. We're going to continue with the tefillah, the Amidah, the central prayer of the evening service, and we're going to chant 155, 156, 157 together, and then we'll continue silently through the end. You can chant along with us in Hebrew, read the English, or offer up your own personal prayer at this time. Adonai sifatai tiftachu fi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai sifatai tiftachu fi yagi tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah. Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor, Hanora, El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim, V'konei Hakol, V'zocher Chasei Avot V'imahot, U'mevii Goel Livneihem, Le'an Shemo B'Ahava, Melech Ozer U'Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch Atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, V'ezrat Sarah, Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayei Metim Atah Rab Lehoshia, Morid Hatah, Mechakel Chaim B'Chesed, Mechayei Metim B'Rachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim V'Rofei Cholim, Umatir Asurim, Umekayem Emunato, Lishenei Afar, Lichamocha Bal Givurot, Umidom Melach, Melech Memit Umechayeh, Umatzmiach Yeshua, V'ne'eman atah l'chayot metim, Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh hametim. Let's turn back to page 160 and we'll read together in the middle of the page. May these hours of rest and renewal open our hearts to joy and our minds to truth. May all who struggle find rest on this day. May all who suffer find solace. May all who hurt find healing on this day. May all who despair find purpose. May all who hunger find fulfillment on this day. And may we all live in such a way that this day fulfill its promise. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha-Shabbat. Let's turn to 163 and we'll read for Modim on the top of page 163 responsibly. For the good in us, which calls us to a better life, we give thanks.
For the strength to improve the world with our hearts and our hands, we offer praise.
For the desire in us, which leads us to work for peace, we are grateful.
for life and nature, harmony and beauty, for the hopes of tomorrow, all praise to the source of being.
Page 164, we'll continue with Shalom Rav. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki atahu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rahav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rahav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Ve'atov beinecha levarech et amcha Yisrael bechol ed ubechol sha'a bishlomecha. Shalom Rahav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Shalom Rahav al Yisrael amcha tasim leolam. Tasim leolam. Tasim leolam. And on page 167, let's add one more prayer for peace. Oseh Shalom. Oseh Shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh Shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael, v'imru, amen. Ya'aseh Shalom, Ya'aseh Shalom, Shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh Shalom, Ya'aseh Shalom, Shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. V'imru, amen. We're going to jump ahead to page 253, the Mishaberach, the prayer for healing. If you have someone who needs some healing this Shabbat, whether it's spiritual, physical, or emotional, keep their names close to your heart. Keep their names in your thoughts as we continue in the middle of page 253. Mishaberach Avotenu Mechor habracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishaberach Imotenu Mekor habracha Le'avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Let's turn to pages 258 and 259 as we recite together the prayers for our community, our congregation, our country, and Israel. Source of all being, may the children of this community learn these passions from us: love of Torah, devotion in prayer, and support of the needy. May we guide with integrity, and may our leadership be in your service. May those who teach and nourish us be blessed with satisfaction, and may we appreciate their time and their devotion. Bless us with the fruits of wisdom and understanding, and may our efforts bring fulfillment and joy. Baruch atah Adonai, she'otcha levadcha b'yirah na'avod. Thus says Adonai, this is what I desire, to unlock the fetters of wickedness and untie the cords of lawlessness, to let the oppressed go free, to break off every yoke. Share your bread with the hungry and take the wretched poor into your home. When you see the naked, give clothing, and do not ignore your own kin. If you banish the yoke from your midst, the menacing hand, the evil speech, if you offer compassion to the hungry and satisfy the famished creature, then your light shall shine in darkness. Page 259. Avinu Shabashamayim, Tzur Yisrael v'Goalo, Barech et Medinat Yisrael, Reshit Smichat Gulatenu. Hagein Aleha Bi'avrat Chastecha, Ufros Aleha Sukat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orcha V'amitecha L'Rosheha Sareha V'yoetzeha, V'tachnein Be'etza Tova Milfanecha, V'natata Shalom Ba'aretz, V'simchat Olam Liyoshveha, V'nomar Amen. O Heavenly One, Protector and Redeemer of Israel, bless the state of Israel, which marks the dawning of hope for all who seek peace. Shield it beneath the wings of your love, spread over it the canopy of your peace. Send your light and truth to all who lead and advise, guiding them with your good counsel. Establish peace in the land and fullness of joy for all who dwell there. Amen. Shabbat Shalom, everyone, and good Shabbos. We are at Parshat Ve'etchanan, which, as far as Parshiot go, as far as Torah portions go, has a lot of oomph to it. There's a lot of important stuff going on in Parshat Ve'etchanan. And we'll get there. Moshe continues his speeches, right? Last week we talked about the book of Devarim, the book of Deuteronomy, being made up of Moses' last major speeches to Bnei Israel, and he continues them this week. He recounts how he pled with God to allow him to go into the promised land. Of course, Moshe is denied that request. There's a midrash. Usually I love midrashim, rabbinic explanations of the text, and there's one that says that Moshe pleaded with God 500 times, went before God 500 times before he stopped, after God denied him 500 times. And so Moses, after the 500th time, says, I'm finished, I'll not come before you again. And at that moment, God says, well, if he had come one more time, I would let you into the land. But that's not one of my favorite midrashim, but it shows that the rabbis, I don't know if they have a sense of humor, but have a sense of irony. Moshe gets to go to the mountaintop. He climbs the mountain, and he's able to view the land, to see the land that Israel is going to conquer. And then he advises Joshua on how to conquer the land. Moshe then reminds the people of the commandments they will live by in the land, and reminds them of the time they stood at Mount Horeb. Now, Mount Horeb is a different name. It's a name for Mount Sinai. So Mount Sinai has two names in the Torah. So he reminds them of the time that they stood at Sinai, and he speaks about the unique relationship they have with God, that God liberated them, and that God is going to give them this land. Moshe then sets aside 3 cities as refuge cities. We talked about these cities a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if it was a Friday night or a Shabbat morning, but there are sanctuary cities that if somebody commits unintentional homicide, so you kill somebody accidentally, we would call it manslaughter, that you're able to run to one of 6 cities and the family of the person you killed isn't allowed to touch you. You get your trial there, and if everything works out all right, you don't suffer the consequence of capital punishment. Moshe then has this long discourse where he talks about the covenant. He talks about the brit that Bnei Yisrael and God entered into, and he restates the 10 commandments. And there are a couple of slight differences in the commandments, the Aseret Hadibrot. One is, instead of saying Zachor et Yom HaShabbat, that you will remember the day of Shabbat, it's Shamor et Yom HaShabbat, to observe it or to protect it. Moshe then gives us what is essence our theology. He gives us the Shema. And immediately after the Shema is the V'ahavta. Both prayers that both pieces of the Torah that are firmly entrenched in our prayer books and in our lives. And Moshe reminds them that we were slaves and that it was God who freed us. And then Moshe lists the people, the tribes that Israel must dislodge from the land of Canaan. This is not just going to be Israel walking in. They have to dislodge the Hittites, the Girgashites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. 7 nations, that have to go. And he commands them that they are not to marry them, and that if we observe the commandments, we'll get a reward, that we'll get blessings, and if we don't observe them, there will be destruction. So pound for pound, this is a pretty important parasha for us, Parashat Ve'ed Hanan. All right, so last week we started our in-depth study of the Aseret Hadibrot, the Decalogue, the 10 utterances, and we talked a little bit about the first utterance, which is God introducing God's self to us and reminding us that God was the one that took us out of Mitzrayim, took us out of the narrow places, took us out of Egypt from the house of slavery. And so the second utterance, the second of the commandments, for lack of the better word, Lo yihyeh lecha Elohim acharim al panai. You shall have no other gods before me, besides me, in front of me, along with me. There are a number of ways that we can translate that. Lo ta'aseh lecha pesel v'chol tmuna asher b'shamayim mima'al v'asher ba'aretz mitachat. That you shall make yourself no sculptured image, or any likeness of what is in the heavens above or the earth below. Va'asher b'mayim mitachat la'aretz, or in the waters under the earth. Lo tishtachaveh lahem, you will not bow down to them. V'lo ta'avdem, and you will not serve them. Ki anochi Adonai Elohecha, because I, the Lord your God, El Kana, I am an impassioned God. I am a jealous God, sometimes it's translated. Poked avot al banim, I will visit I will punish the sins of the father unto the children. Al shilashim va'al rebeim, unto the 3rd and 4th generations, l'sonai, to those who hate me. V'oseh chesed la'alafim, but I will do kindness to the 1,000th generation. La'ohavai l'holavei u'shomrei mitzvotai, to those who love me and keep my commandments. So that's a pretty lot going on for the second utterance. right? It could have stopped, really. This comes after the introduction, right? And in some numberings of the Decalogue, the introduction and this one constitute the first of the commandments. But what it really gets down to, this right after introducing us to God, it gets down to the idea of monotheism, right? One God. God says, I'm your God, and you don't need any other gods other than me. So you, Bnei Yisrael, you, the children of Israel, are going to worship me and not a pantheon. There's not a God for the sun and a God for the moon and a God for the stars. There's not a God for the trees, for the grasses, for the herbs. I am that God. You don't need anybody else. And so what God says, al panai, right? There, like I said, there are three ways we could do that. God says, I'm the Lord your God. You don't need any gods beside me. Meaning, I'm it. You don't need a bunch of gods. One stop prayer, right? One God, just me. It could also be al panai, it can also mean in addition to, right? We don't need an extra God. We don't need a God. We have this big God, but we don't need another God just in case, right? It's just this one God. And then al panai can mean in place of, meaning you might want to look at other gods. You might want to replace me, but you can't. And why can't you? Because see the first one. See the first of the Aseret HaDibrot. I'm the Lord your God. I brought you out of Mitzrayim. I'm the one that freed you. So you owe me, for lack of a better way of putting it. So what it comes down to is this idea of monotheism, and we're not allowed to have any kind of idols. We're not allowed to have representations of idols. We're not allowed to have a representation of God. And what God seems to be saying to us is, look, as long as you have me, you don't need anyone else. We have an exclusive relationship. I'm your God, you're my people, and that's how things are going to go. And the statement could have stopped there. Right? It could have just ended right there, and we would have a perfectly great second utterance. Right? I'm the Lord your God. I'm the Lord your God. You don't need any other gods. That's it. But it continues. And it continues to say that you're not going to make an image of me. You're not going to carve me out. You're not going to make an image of me out of physical things. You're not going to make an image of things in the stars, in the sky, in the earth, on the earth, and the sea. You're not going to try and envision what I look like, because God has no form. All right? Now you're going to say, but Rabbi, if we read the Torah, God, of course, has a form. God takes us out of Egypt with a mighty hand and an outstretched arm. God is talking, so therefore God has to have a mouth. God hears the cries of the children of Israel while they're in slavery. God hears us kvetching when we don't have food or when we don't have water. Obviously, God has some sort of form. And believe me, you're not the first ones to say that the Torah is filled with God having a human form. But our commentators all say that that's just due to our limited human imagination. We can't conceive of something so vast that it has no form, but is so powerful and influences us and our lives. So we have to give God, we personify God, or we anthropomorphize God, even though God can't have that, doesn't have those forms. And the philosophers, the Jewish philosophers, say that if we try to put a form on God, we limit God, right? So the moment you start envisioning God as an old man with a white beard and a white robe sitting on a throne, you've now limited God. And so philosophers like Maimonides, the great Rambam, and others say that we have a negative theology. We can only describe what God isn't. Right? So the moment we say that God is an old man with long white beard and a white robe, what we're saying is that God is not a woman, that God does not have a brown beard, that God does not have short hair, right? So we're limiting God, whereas if we just to say God has no form, God has no body, God has no arm, then that opens up for more of what God could be. On a very practical level, right? For us, we take this for granted. We know we've had this commandment recited to us since we were children. We've wrestled with it. We've learned it. But if we put ourselves in the shoes or the sandals, as it were, of Bnei Yisrael, of the original people who heard this, this is a teaching moment for God. And God is telling them or teaching them that they're going to be different, that they don't need idols. Everybody else has idols, right? They've just come out of Egypt. And if you know Egypt, there are idols all over the place, right? Even the idols that aren't really idols, like the pyramids, they were still important religious icons and iconography that there. We have statues of Anubis and statues of Isis and all sorts of Isis? Was that that's the I keep thinking of the comic book or the
terrorist group, yeah, same name.
Yeah, same name. Okay. I don't want right. Anubis, and they had the Sphinx, and they had all these different things that represented their gods and their idols. So they had to unlearn polytheism. They had to unlearn that. And it takes a very long time for Israel to unlearn polytheism and to teach monotheism, the idea that there's just the one God. What it boils down for us on a more practical level is that we need to stop treating other things like they're God, that they're the be-all and the end-all. Money, cars, big houses, right? We chase after them as if that's going to make our life wonderful, and that becomes an idol. And that's what I think the Torah is teaching us. And then at the very, very end, we have this strange addition. We have God describing God's self as Kana. And often, like I said, if you pick up the King James translation of the Bible, it'll say that God is a jealous God. But it could also be that God is impassioned, that God demands loyalty. That when God doesn't get loyalty, God gets angry and frustrated. That we entered into a covenant with God, and then in some of the comments that I've read, that it's like a marriage bond. We entered into a holy union with God, and we're not allowed to see other gods. We're not allowed to worship other gods. We have the one God. And if God is impassioned, God is emotionally involved with us. God is emotionally involved in human affairs. God has a stake in the matter. We are God's people, and God is our God. And it seems to suggest, and a number of commentators kind of just shake their head at this, and that no matter what this part suggests that God is capable of anger as well as compassion. Right, and that there's this idea of punishment, being the sins of the fathers visited upon the children. And a number of the comments that I read in preparing for this evening suggest that it's not necessarily that if the parent does something wrong, say the parent steals, that the child is going to get punished because in place of the parent, and that's not the case. What it boils down to is that the parents' choices affect their children. How parents behave affects how their children are going to grow up. And so what the Torah is warning parents is that don't lead a life that's going to be harmful to your children. And the children are shaped by the decisions made by their families. Right? It's as much nature as it is nurture, how we interact. And he says that God pokad, that God notices the sins that the parents inflict on their children. God pays attention. God knows when the parents are not being good parents. In Deuteronomy, right, we're in the book of Exodus for this Decalogue. In the book of Deuteronomy, in the 24th chapter, verse 16, this part of the Ten Commandments is basically written out of existence, where it says that the parents are not, the children are not responsible for the sins of their parents. And the prophets, most notably Jeremiah and Ezekiel, will do away with this idea of cross-generational punishment altogether. And they'll say each individual is accountable for how they behave, not the parents, because the parents don't suffer because of the children, and the children will not suffer or should not suffer because of the sins of the fathers and the mothers. So that's the second commandment in a nutshell. There's a lot to digest there. One thing that is a misnomer, one thing that's often taught, but it's not really true, is that Jews are forbidden to be artists, right? Because it says, "You shall not make any image of something that's on the earth or in the heavens or in the sea." But most of the commentators, except the really traditionalist ones, will say that only applies to making idols, not to making paintings, not to drawing, not to watercolors and things like that. So if you're going to make a pretty picture of a sunset and you're not going to worship it, you're free to go. But that idea of not making any kind of images or any kind of idol has really affected Jews in terms of art. I can only think of a handful of Jewish artists, and one of the most famous being Marc Chagall. Right, so sometimes a little bit of information can send us down the wrong path. So it's okay if you want to be an artist, just don't make idols. Don't make idols. All right, so next week we'll pick up with the third commandment, and I wish you all Shabbat Shalom and good Shabbos. Thank you. And we'll continue. It is already Aleinu time. Page 282. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hapol latet gedula liotzer breshit shelo asanu kagoye haratzo velo samanu kamishpachot hadama shelo sam chalkenu kahem vegor aleinu kechol hamonam la'anachnu korim Umishtachavim umodim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu shehu noteh shamayim v'yoser haaretz u'moshav yekaro b'shamayim imah u'shchinatu zo B'govhei meromim, Hu Eloheinu Einod, Emet Malkeinu Efesulato, Kakahatu V'torahato, V'yadata Hayom V'hashevota, Elemavecha, Ki Adonai hu Elohim, b'shamayim imah, v'al haaretz mitachat eino. Back on page 285, let's read together. Let the time not be distant, O God, when all shall turn to you in love, when corruption and evil shall give way to integrity and goodness, when superstition shall no longer enslave the mind, nor idolatry blind the eye. O may all created in your image become one in spirit and one in friendship, forever united in your service. Then shall your realm be established on earth, and the word of your prophet fulfilled. Adonai will reign forever and ever. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol ha'aretz. Bayom hahu, yeh Adonai echad. Ushemo echad. We continue observing this week the Shloshim for Gilbert Weisberg. And this week's yard sites, or we observed the following yard sites: Charlotte Birdman, Ethel Levine's sister, Sheldon's aunt; Inga Field, David's mother, and she was married to Bill; Rosalie C. Schechter, Mickey Goldenberg's sister, Janice's aunt; Sophie Brodoff, Terry and Mark's mother, Herman's wife; Paul Supovitz, Lynn Mayer's father. He was married to Sylvia Silverberg, and they raised 2 daughters. Olga Greenfield, Joyce Levy's mother; Fred Pastor, Ethel Levine's brother, Sheldon's uncle; William Solacek, Mark's uncle, Nathan's brother. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life eternal. May their memories be a blessing to us always, and may they all rest in peace. Continue with Mourner's Kaddish, page 294. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, v'yalma divrach kirutei v'yamlik malchutei, b'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevorach le'olam u'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shmei dekudusha brichu le'elam min kol birchata v'shirata tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiram v'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. All right, well, Shabbat shalom, everyone, and good Shabbos. Let's see, services tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., right back here, and then Sunday morning at 9 a.m. Yiddish choir on Wednesday at 7 o'clock for the best little Yiddish choir on the banks of any river in America. That's 7 o'clock Wednesday evening via Zoom. Sam, am I forgetting anything?
Nope, I don't think you are.
Nope. We had a really nice session on Sunday with Bubba Mices, and I've already gotten a couple of suggestions. One, a class on the idea of Jewish death and dying and the afterlife. So that's a possibility that we could have. There's some stuff about anti-Semitism I want to study with you, and a whole bunch of other things. So if you have something that you might be interested in learning, drop me an email. And we'll see what we can do to make it happen. But we're going to have lots of classes and lots of times to study together as we move forward into the summer and into the fall. So, all right, let's close out with we've been doing Adon Olam a lot, and I like Adon Olam. But tell you what, let's do Ein Keloheinu tonight. Let's shake things up just a little bit. Ein Keloheinu. Some people in Brooklyn like Ein Keloheinu, and I like Ein Keloheinu, and obviously Jews like Ein Keloheinu because it's in the Siddur. So and that's on page 322. Ein Keloheinu, Ein Kadoneinu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Mi Eloheinu, Mi Adonenu, Mi Kemalkeinu, Mi Kemoshienu. Del Eloheinu, no del Adonenu, no del Emalkeinu, no del Moshienu. Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu. Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu. Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Good Shabbos. We'll see you soon.